We had to stay in the hospital for 9 days after Chase was born because I was still having a crisis. On the first night after Chase was born, the nurses told me I needed to breastfeed her. The baby needs colostrum, they said. They kept repeating those sorts of phrases. The baby needs this, and the baby needs that. I didn't know any better, so I agreed. It seemed like the right thing to do. And they make you feel so guilty if you don't pop your titties out for the baby immediately. No bottle formula, or you're a bad mother. But sickle cell patients need every drop of fluid they can get, and losing that much breast milk shocked my body and almost stopped my heart. Every time Chase latched on, I would vomit and lose more fluids, but I felt forced into it. Eventually, my body shut down and I fell into a coma. I spent 3 days unconscious in the ICU with my newborn daughter waiting for me to wake up. When I did finally wake, everything was blurry. My eyelids felt heavy. My mama was there along with several nurses. Chase wasn't in the room. Go get her baby, my mama told one of the nurses. I could hear the urgency in her voice. Go. I blinked at the fluorescent lights. The room felt alien. Suddenly, the nurse was there holding Chase. She was so small, her fingers curled so tight. Put the baby on her heart, my mama said. Lay her down. And then Chase was stretched out over the left side of my chest, her heart beating against mine. Tionne, my mama said, you have to fight. You have someone to live for. Chase breathed slowly on top of me. I could feel her, alive, against me. She was definitely something to live for. When I woke fully, once my mama was convinced I was not going to fall back into a coma, I held Chase in my arms. Her arrival was not just the beginning of her life, but of my own too. I decided that my life would be divided into 2 eras, before Chase and after Chase. I would try to change my life for the better. I would try to turn the other cheek when people made me angry. No more jumping over counters or putting my hands on people. I couldn't make any promises, but I wanted to try. From now on, whenever I want to whoop someone's ass, I'd say to myself, she gets a Chase pass. And, for the record, I don't plan on breaking any more faces in the future. All jokes aside, I had a daughter. Now, if I died, I'd leave someone behind. She was born against all odds, and she gave me something to live for. She changed everything. All the days before Chase were BC, and all those after were AC. Chapter 9. R.I.P. Lily, Lisa, Left Eye. I called Lisa by a lot of different names over the years because she had a lot of different personalities. Her middle name was Nicole, so sometimes I called her that. Sometimes it was Nikki, which was her wilder side, and sometimes Lily, the shy girl. And, of course, she was left-eyed to the world. She was so many things, not just the persona that people on the outside saw. She was this force of nature. One day she was here, and then one day she wasn't. After we'd finished promoting fan mail, I went into the hospital, struck down again by my disease. I was exhausted and sick, and there was an undeniable tedium that came along with being trapped inside the cold walls of a hospital for days on end. I had nothing to do but sit in the bed, waiting to feel better. Nurses constantly stuck me with needles, drawing blood and putting in IVs. Nurses have a bad habit of not listening, digging and tearing through your flesh with needle after needle, poking everything but your vein. My veins were so bad, totally blown out from all the IVs I'd had over the years, to the point that they put needles in my feet, breasts, shoulders, neck, or wherever they could find a vein. I wanted to get out of there so bad. I was convinced that my aunt's church group had hexed me, and that's why I was in the hospital. My aunt had gotten in deep with this group of churchgoers, and one evening she invited me over to join one of their gatherings. They said they wanted to save my soul, which was crazy since I don't drink or do drugs, nor have I done most of the things that some of them have done in their own lives. They were judging me with no real knowledge. My aunt wasn't involved. She didn't realize what was happening. While she was outside, the group started laying hands on me and speaking in tongues and praying, saying things like, "She's sleeping with the enemy." They were referring to my husband. It was crazy. I got out of there quick, not even saying goodbye to my aunt. After I left, I felt really weird and I had pain on my left side. I had to leave a recording session with Dallas to go to the ER, and as soon as I walked into the waiting room, I told my cousin Marty, "I'm not going to leave here for a while." I really felt it. After being hospitalized for 2 weeks, they tried to send me home. My blood work didn't match what I was telling the doctors I was feeling. I went home and passed out in the bathroom. You can be sick, and sometimes your body reacts to the pain first, before any real results show up in any medical tests. Some doctors think they know it all and don't listen. But there was something majorly wrong with me. I ended up having pleurisy, which is fluid in my lungs, a dying spleen, and pancreatitis, as well as one of my usual sickle cell crises. My veins refused to cooperate, so the doctors were forced to put a triple lumen in my neck to connect to my artery. I had one cord to draw blood out, one to administer medicine, and a third to feed me intravenously because I couldn't drink or eat real food. It was terrible. I was bummed out and convinced I was hexed and stuck for what ended up being 4 months. When you're in the hospital, anything helps. Any connection from the outside world, any reminder that people were thinking of me made a difference. It helped to take my mind off of what was going on. The most important person and the best medicine for me is my mom, but I'd like support from my friends too. Lisa knew that because she'd watched me go in and out of hospitals so often. Things had been so tense, and she was still angry at me for dissing her music with Suge Knight, but I never stopped caring about Lisa or our friendship. During this particular hospital visit, Lisa sent me plants and letters every day for several days. Each one felt like a small motion to mend the cracks between us. "Get better," she wrote. "I'll be waiting for you." The plants began to line the windowsill of my room, slowly brightening it. On the third day, a package arrived. I peeled back the paper and found a drum symbol. On it, in black ink, Lisa had scrawled a picture of a clock on it and written, "Take all the time you need." It meant that I shouldn't worry if my disease was keeping the band from doing something, that my illness wasn't an inconvenience. She was giving me permission to heal. On my 4th day, I didn't get a plant or a package or a letter. Instead, I heard Lisa's voice soaring through the hospital hallway. She was so loud. I loved that about her. "Tionne!" she exclaimed, bursting into my room. I knew she was there to apologize. She was leaving the next day to go to Honduras, and she wanted to make sure we were cool. We were somehow. That's the power of a friendship like ours, that you can forgive and forget as quickly as things can fall apart. It was like we'd never fought, like things had never fallen off track. That was unspoken between us. We just smiled and hugged, and that said it all. It didn't feel significant in the moment. It was just another bump in the road that we'd overcome. I had no idea that was the last time I'd ever see Lisa. Lisa wanted a break from TLC and a break from her life at home. She struggled through the process of fan mail and in her solo endeavors, and I think she couldn't quite pinpoint who she wanted to be going forward. She went back to Honduras in search of herself. She'd been going to Honduras a lot over the past few years to work with a man named Dr. Sabi, an herbalist. She stopped eating meat and sugar and was constantly on a cleanse. She was trying to find religion, and she also got into numerology. I had tried some of the herbs Dr. Sabi recommended to see if it could help with my sickle cell. It didn't work for me. I had to be careful with certain herbs. I ended up in the hospital with another crisis after taking them, but to me, this trip didn't seem strange. It was just what Lisa did. She filmed the trip, which later became a documentary called The Last Days of Left Eye. In the footage, she said she had premonitions. She felt like a spirit was chasing her. She'd gotten in a car accident while her assistant was driving, and they'd unintentionally killed a small boy. She thought the spirit accidentally killed him instead of her because his last name was Lopez, too. She took care of all of his funeral expenses. She had a big heart. I felt as though she should have ended the trip then, but they stayed on. We weren't really in touch while she was away. I was still in the hospital, dealing with my own life and trying to survive because my organs were failing, and she was on this journey. I knew she'd come back and we'd be cool and we'd go back into the studio and work again. On April 23rd, 2002, I was out of the hospital. I was frail and weak, and I dropped so much weight. I weighed 92 pounds. I was skin and bones. I felt like an elderly old woman, skin sagging off my legs. I had to go to the doctor every Tuesday for a year afterward, just to be sure I was okay. My spleen was so fragile that the doctors told me that if I wore a seatbelt and the car stopped suddenly, it could rupture and I could die. I was feeling well enough to go to my cousin Marty's birthday party on the 25th, even though I'd been out only a few days. I bought a house in Atlanta and sold the one in California at the time, and I was glad to be in Atlanta now because it meant I could see my family. I leaned against the window of my Porsche as my security guard Dave drove me across town to the party, but something felt off. "Stop," I said. I was having a premonition of my own. I was certain that I was going to get in a crash. "We have to go back and switch cars," I told him. "Why?" Dave asked. "I feel like I'm going to get in a wreck," I told him. I felt so sure of it. "You don't ever seem nervous like this," he said. He thought I was tripping. "I don't know," I replied. I had this crawling feeling at the back of my neck. I just feel like something is going to happen to me. So he drove me all the way back home and we climbed into my Hummer instead. That thing was like a tank. It felt so much safer. We were okay to drive back to the party, but that premonition wasn't about me, as it turned out. My car, no matter which one I drove, wasn't ever going to crash. That evening, I came home from the party and put Chase to bed. I settled in the rocking chair in her room to watch Judge Mathis while she slept. At around midnight, my phone rang. It was Chili. She was weeping so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. "It's Lisa," she sobbed, struggling to get the words out. "She's been in a wreck." I didn't understand what that meant. "What?" I asked. "Lisa is dead," Chili managed. She heard it from our manager. I didn't know how to process the information at all. I hung up and just stood there, immobile. The first stage of grief is denial, and that's a real thing. As I stood there, suddenly Chase bolted awake and started screaming. It was like she knew. It was like she felt whatever I felt. I dealt with death before, and it was always painful, but not like this. You're somewhat prepared for death if you know someone is sick, with cancer, or going to die, but never for unexpected ones. If someone is sick, you have enough time to grapple with the idea of loss. I ran downstairs to tell Damon, tears pouring down my cheeks, holding my screaming baby. This time, I knew it was real. It wasn't one of Lisa's tricks. I wished it was fake. I knew it was true because of the way the phones went off when Aaliyah died. My phone started going off the same way. It wasn't a bad joke. This time, it was true. We quickly found out what happened. Lisa had been driving a car in Honduras, and it had gone off the road. There were 7 other people in the car, and she was the only one who didn't survive the crash. The report said Lisa had been speeding and lost control. The car had rolled, and she died from head trauma instantly. 4 of the other passengers had to be hospitalized. Lisa had died at the same time I had decided to switch cars. My premonition had been about her. By 4 a.m., we had to release a statement about Lisa's death to CNN. We had all grown up together, and we were as close as family, the statement said. Today we have truly lost our sister. We didn't know what else to say. What are you supposed to say in a situation like this? There are really no words. The day the news broke was my birthday. Lisa died on April 25th, and the next day was my birthday. I spent the day at her mom's house, and there was nothing to celebrate. After we arrived at the house, Lisa's mom saw me and Chili sitting together and almost fainted because she didn't see her daughter with us. It was too much for her to bear to see TLC with a member missing. Pebbles came over too. We hadn't seen or spoken to her in a long time. She'd recently found God, so she kept trying to put prayer cloths over our heads and force us to lie down and confess our sins and get healed. She was what I call a baby Christian. Baby Christians are people who find God midway through life and think they know more than most because they have this newfound thing they're so deep into. I grew up with faith. I went to church my whole life. I didn't need this right now. Finally, I told Dallas, just lay back so she'll stop. We all pretended to let her heal us so she'd go away and let us grieve in peace. Maybe she was sincere, but it was the wrong time to get us to confess our sins. The news was everywhere. It was front page stuff, and the world was crying with us. Chili and I were asked to call in to MTV's TRL to talk about what happened. We didn't want to, but it felt like our duty to our fans. John Norris, whom we've known for years, opened the show by announcing the news of Lisa's passing. Then he got us on the phone. Chili was sobbing hysterically. Neither of us was prepared to do this. If one of you feels up to talking, can you tell us how you found out this happened? John asked. Chili was crying too hard to speak. Yes, I said, this is T-BOZ. How were you guys informed of what happened? John asked. I took a deep breath. I heard it from Chili, who heard it from our manager first, I said. I tried to remain as calm as possible. Thousands of fans were listening right now. Had you guys spoken to Lisa recently? He asked. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I was in the hospital, I choked. And that was the last time I'd seen her. I was in the hospital for 2 months, and she came to see me about 3 weeks ago. John asked how Lisa was doing at the time. She was doing good, I said. That was the truth. A few weeks ago, everything had been fine. We were working on the album, but I got sick, so we all kind of took a break so I could get better, I continued. We all did our thing until it was time to go back into the studio. We had a lot of nice songs together, I added. We were supposed to be recording music with Lisa, not mourning her death. We'd been together for over 10 years. We were like sisters. I could barely get my head around it, even as I was on TV talking about it to the world. John asked us to share something about Lisa people might not have realized. Lisa had one of the biggest hearts of anybody we'd ever known, I said. She would take a stray person off the street and give him the shirt off her back. She'd take all the money in her pocket and take care of whoever, whenever. She did charity work with kids all the time for lupus. I paused. She was a very special person. Lisa could do anything she put her mind to. We handed the phone over to our manager, who read a statement from Lisa's mom. As soon as I knew we were off the air, I collapsed into tears. No one should have to explain the death of their sister and bandmate on live TV. I knew then that nothing was going to be the same after that. Everything had changed when Lisa died. My whole world crumbled. We had something real, and that's what I loved about her. That day, as the news spread across the globe, was the end of TLC as we knew it. They flew Lisa's body back to Atlanta and funeral preparations began. It happened quickly. Her body arrived on Monday, and there was a memorial for her family on Wednesday. The wake took place in this funeral home. When the limo pulled up, I just sat there. I couldn't get out. My mom had to force me. It took 20 minutes because I felt like it would become real if I emerged from the limo. Lisa's body was in a tiny room. I went in with my mom and Damon and looked at her. She was lifeless. Tears ran down my face. As I was sitting there, I heard this voice next to me. Bobby, she said. Bobby! It was Whitney Houston. She had Bobby Christina, who must have been about 10 at the time, in tow. She dragged Bobby Christina up to me as I was bawling my eyes out and said, You remember her? She knew you when you was in your mama belly. What was happening? I'm here crying over Lisa's body, and Whitney's trying to tell her daughter how I knew her in the womb? After I left the viewing, I crammed myself in this little holding room at the funeral home with Babyface Chili, Usher, Pebbles, Bobby Brown, Whitney, and Damon. It was the size of a small closet, but somehow we were all packed in. Pebbles couldn't contain herself. See, Lisa should have came to me, Pebbles said. I could have saved her. Excuse me? No. She couldn't have saved her. This was what had happened. There had been 8 people in the car, and Lisa was the only one who didn't make it. It was her time. No one wants to hear that when a loved one has passed away. If that's what was meant to have happened, it would have. I believe everything happens for a reason, even if we don't like or understand the reason. Babyface, me and you used to talk every day, Pebbles said next, oblivious to the situation around her. Usher, you bought my house and I don't ever see you. We got to do better than this. I couldn't process this. It was too much. I was 92 pounds because I'd spent 4 months in the hospital. I looked like a toothpick. My eyes were red from crying. Damon took my hand and pulled me out of the room. You just got out of the hospital, he said, and you don't need all this drama. Let's go. The actual funeral took place the following morning at the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia. Thousands of people showed up, literally thousands. MTV claimed it was close to 10,000 fans, but I have no idea. It was a blur. Some of the fans had traveled miles to be there, and they arrived with posters and hand-painted portraits of Lisa. A lot of artists came to pay their respects too. Usher, Janet Jackson, Whitney, Bobby, Monica, Suge Knight, Babyface, all there. The service lasted 2 hours. Everyone crammed into the church. They played a video montage of Lisa, and L.A. Reid, Lisa's brother Ronald, and her Aunt Pamela all spoke. Her mom read a poem she'd written for Lisa before her death. Mary Mary, one of Lisa's favorite groups, played. The entire funeral was one of the most surreal experiences of my entire life. It obviously wasn't funny at the time, but when I recall it now, it seems like something out of a bad sitcom. Fans were screaming and trying to take photos and videos. I thought, this is not the time. It was the longest funeral of my life. Lisa had been dating Suge Knight, and he fell asleep halfway through. He was actually snoring as the readings went on. Whitney and Bobby were seated behind me, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that Whitney repeated every single word that the pastor said. If he said, "Thank you, Jesus," Whitney would croon, "Thank you, Jesus." She sung every word back out loud. I kept thinking, this cannot be happening. But there was Whitney singing and rubbing my shoulder and saying, "It's going to be all right, baby." At one point, I turned around to look at Bobby and he just shrugged, acknowledging that she was acting crazy. But then 30 minutes later, I looked back and he was hooping and hollering with her. It was a circus. When I think about it now, I can barely believe it was real. I remember the antics of everyone there, even the pastor. The notorious Bishop Eddie Long seemed like he was putting on a show. He could have delivered a great speech. He just kept saying, "Watch this, watch this, watch this," like he was going to deliver some big, deep message, but he never did. Lisa's casket had words from Waterfalls engraved in the wood. They read, "Dreams are hopeless aspirations and hopes of coming true. Believe in yourself, the rest is up to me and you." It was a good line and a hopeful one, too. The words and the casket and Lisa's body were laid to rest in the Hillendale Memorial Gardens in Lithonia. I missed her dearly, and she was barely even gone. It was impossible to move on after Lisa died. It was like no one would let us either. The news was so big, and she'd been so famous. Everyone everywhere was talking about her. I'd go to the movies and the people in the row in front of me would be chatting about her death. Or I'd go into a McDonald's and someone would say, "Did you hear about the girl Left Eye?" It was everywhere I went. Sometimes the people talking noticed me and sometimes they didn't. If they saw me, they'd just say, "Aw," or "Sorry about Left Eye." Others would offer condolences and then ask, "But can I take a quick photo with you?" Some would even tell me they could rap like we were preparing to replace Lisa. It had been mere days since her death, and I didn't know how to take that. I couldn't tell if I was a real person to the fans. I couldn't tell if they recognized my pain and my grief, or if they just didn't care. With this sort of stuff surrounding me, I became a hermit. I locked myself away. I'm not someone who's prone to depression. Who has time for that? But after Lisa died, I fell into a depression that lasted 2 years. Everybody has a breaking point. This was mine. Lisa was my road dog and my creative partner, and she was gone. This became my reality. For 2 years, I couldn't think about the creative stuff. It stopped making sense to me. It's not that I had no one to talk to about it, but I didn't want to constantly discuss it. No one knew what life on the road was like or what it meant to one of the world's biggest acts and to lose your third member while in the public spotlight. It was awful. I was so messed up. It was a life in TLC without the L. And a week after Lisa passed, I lost a good friend, the world-renowned makeup artist Kevin Aquan. The stress took a toll on me. I ended up back in the hospital. I just lay there, sad. When you have children, though, you have to push through, no matter what. You can't give in fully to depression. I was heartbroken, but I still had a child to raise and feed. Here's the thing about being an artist, too. Most people don't care if you're sad. There's a bottom line, and people have to get paid. You've signed contracts. Albums have to be finished and released, and fans are waiting. If you have a sold-out concert, you have to go on stage and pretend to be happy, no matter what is going on in your personal life. You have to muster up the energy and keep on. Chili and I worked through the grief because we had to. It wasn't an option to really feel our own sadness. The record label expected us to deliver 3D, so that's what we had to do. We had to complete what we started with Lisa. The record label gave us some weeks off, but it didn't feel like enough. No amount of time would have been enough. And no matter how we were feeling, they expected an album. If you're an artist and you're unhappy, it shows in your work. I've had people ask me why I'm not a more sensitive person. This is why. Most people don't care, so you can't go around being fragile. You develop a thick skin because you have to. We finished 3D, and the album wasn't the best. I'm not afraid to say it. There were a couple of good songs. One of them was So Dumb, which I wrote with Raphael Sadiq. Pharrell did one, which was cool. I wrote the first single, Girl Talk, with Candy Burris, and I thought it was only okay. To this day, I don't want to perform it. Fans love it overseas because the beat is knocking and it's fun to dance to. I knew I was slipping. I was under so much pressure. Lisa had died, and I was being forced to finish an album I wasn't ready to finish. Even the album cover looks depressing. We look like death, wearing all black and frowning. I laugh about it now because Chili's there looking like Batman, and I have this face that looks like, duh. What were we thinking? Lisa was the only one who looked good, and she wasn't here anymore. If I could go back, I would do it all differently, but we weren't in the right headspace to know. We just wanted to be left alone with our grief and have a little time off to heal. If we'd had more clarity, I think we would have released Turntable as the first single. I wrote it with Rodney Jerkins about Lisa's passing, and it was about how after something bad comes good. It talked about how all things happen for a reason. It would have given the album a different feeling and honored Lisa more, but it didn't occur to us to begin there at the time. Lisa had left behind material she'd recorded for both 3D and for her second solo album. We used 3 of her raps and took some of her vocal recordings to help flesh out the material. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't like having her there to write new lyrics or to be with us in the studio. Her style before she passed was somewhat poetic. We needed to match the vibe of her lyrics and raps to our music, and a lot of it didn't fit. Our music just wasn't like that. Plus, Suge owned the gangster rap stuff she made as Nina, and no one wanted to deal with him. It was never even an option for us to replace her. That wouldn't have been right or felt right. We did the best we could do with what was left. We wanted at least to pay tribute to Lisa. The best memory I have of 3D is Chase there in the studio with me the entire time. She was only 2 years old, and she was more attached to me than usual. She refused to be away from me, even in the next room. She got really clingy after Lisa died, like she could feel the sadness, and she spent every minute of the album sitting on my hip. You can hear her crying on the Missy Elliott and Timberland song because she came with me into the vocal booth. She was always connected to music because I sang to her while she was in the womb. I'd put speakers on my belly and played songs for her. After she was born, she seemed to find those songs familiar, turning toward the sound and cooing. Music is as embedded in my child's soul as it is in mine, so it feels right that she was part of making one of TLC's albums. 3D dropped on November 12, 2002, 7 months after Lisa's death. It was a hit immediately, landing at number 6 on the Billboard 200 and eventually going platinum. I guess fans still cared, and some were at least curious. What would TLC be like without Lisa? We got positive reviews. Billboard said the album seemed like a fitting tribute to our fallen sister, which felt good to hear. We shot all of the music videos without Lisa. At the end of the Girl Talk video, we ran a tribute to her, leaving the fans with the words, "In loving memory of Lisa Left Eye Lopez." We ended up getting 2 Grammy nominations for 3D, despite my personal feelings about its quality. Chili and I went to the awards show to represent. We smiled on the red carpet and waved to the press. We wore glittering diamond belts on our black pants that paid homage to Lisa, each one depicting the words "left eye." We emblazoned our pants and jackets with giant white eyes. I even had her symbols on my earrings. Everything we wore was about her. Joan Rivers interviewed us as we made our way into the show. "Do you think you'll add a 3rd member to the group?" she asked us. "Never, never, never, never," Chili said, shaking her head. "You can't replace a TLC girl." "So how do you do it?" Joan asked. "How do you change the arrangements when there are 3 of you?" "Actually," I said, "we were done with more than half of the album before she passed on. So we're just keeping this album going, and then we'll see what happens. But no, it's the same. I felt myself pulling back. It's the same, I repeated. But it wasn't exactly. And we all knew it. Everything was going to be different now. We didn't win anything that year, but it didn't matter. We were still a band, no matter what, no matter who was missing. We wanted the world to see that TLC was still standing. But what now? Chili and I needed a break from the band. We needed to heal and figure out who we were without Lisa. I was going to have to just be Tionne for a while and find out what my world would be like without my group. Chapter 10. Life Without TLC. After Lisa died, a lot of people stopped believing in TLC. It was a strange phenomenon. The industry and the fans associated the three of us together, so it was hard for people to imagine that we could continue on with only two. People always viewed TLC as one. After Lisa burned down Andre's house, I'd been forced to prove to everyone that I wasn't an arsonist too. We were three separate people, and sometimes I think people had a hard time realizing we had separate lives too. Record label execs, including LA, counted us out. How would TLC perform? How could we make it? Questions were constantly flying around. But Lisa's passing didn't take away my talent. My talent didn't stop. TLC would never be the same, but we could adjust. We could create a new normal. There was no talk of replacing Lisa. We shut down any supposition that would happen. But we knew that we could keep Lisa's spirit alive. She could live on in our style, our performances, our dances, everything. Each time we played a concert, her energy would be there. It might take time to get it all right, but TLC wasn't finished, and I wanted the world to stop discounting us. In 2003, TLC played our first show without Lisa. It was in East Rutherford, New Jersey, at Giant Stadium, where we performed at the annual Z100 Zootopia radio concert. There were a ton of other artists there, Aerosmith, Mariah Carey, Genuine, and it felt strange to be getting back up on a stage in front of 60,000 plus fans. They billed the show as TLC's final performance, although that's obviously not what it was. It was a great way to sell tickets, though. Britney Spears and Carson Daly came on stage to introduce us, and we opened the set with a video montage in dedication to Lisa. Chili and I waited in the wings with our 4 backup dancers as the video clip rolled, emotions surging through us. I was nervous because I didn't want to let the crowd down, but I also didn't want to cry in front of them. As we went on stage to perform, I forced myself to face the crowd. I didn't want to turn around because behind us was the giant video screen covered in images of Lisa. The ideal was that she was performing Ain't Too Proud to Beg and What About Your Friends along with us. There was footage of the three of us together, which we still use in our shows today. It's changed some over the years, but it's there. It's meant to leave the crowd with a good feeling. That night, before we played Waterfalls, Chili told the audience, this was Lisa's favorite song. Our set ended with Waterfalls, which always feels sentimental regardless. And as we walked off, a photo of the three of us from our early years in TLC plastered itself up on the screen. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I knew nothing was going to be the same. It felt so impossibly hard, but we had to keep facing forward, both on the stage that day and in our lives. Playing a concert without Lisa felt surreal. It was like I was floating out of my body, watching something I couldn't connect to completely. I was numb. I felt like all of my moves and my lyrics were programmed into me, and I was a robot who just had to do what I was put up there to do. I had to show people we could perform without our third member. On stage, I was emotionless. I always enjoy the fans, but there was a void. I looked forward and I sang, and I danced, and we were still TLC. This was hard, and it was going to take a long time for it to get any easier. Some nights were easier than others. You never know which emotions would hit. On some days, I'd just break down and cry. There was never any internal discussion that TLC would break up, despite how challenging it felt. Chili and I didn't want the band to end. We blindly kept moving forward. After we played the show in New Jersey, it was clear that Chili and I needed to take some space to heal. I didn't entirely know what that would mean for me. I'd been part of this group for years now. I'd gotten used to life on the road and in the studio with them. We spent more time with each other than our own families. It was weird to be without them. Chili and I continued doing things with TLC that weren't concerts. We did an awesome campaign with Pfizer to promote a new drug they had for AIDS patients. It had nothing to do with music. We had no current plans to make any new music. We still had bills to pay and kids to feed. I spoke solo at seminars about sickle cell. It was a difficult time. My personal life had started to crumble as well. I was a mother and a wife outside of the band, but all was not well on the home front. Damon and I were not happy. We stopped making sense together. It's important to know when you've outgrown something and when it's time to leave. I had to face that truth. On June 8th, 2004, I filed for divorce. Chase was 3 years old at the time. Everyone loves drama, especially when it involves someone famous, so it can be easy to forget that celebrities are real people. The press had a field day with it. It was heartbreaking, the same way it is when any couple calls it quits. The media likes to ignore the fact, but I was hurting a lot. The press didn't have their facts right either. I never said anything bad about Damon to the press. It's not their business anyway, and I would never hurt my daughter or his children like that. Things got really messy, and I think what happened between the two of us should remain behind closed doors. I learned a lot about myself during the divorce. Going through that process taught me so much. I learned what I should and shouldn't do in any future relationship. I learned to keep things to myself. It doesn't always make sense to reveal the drama between two people to your families because it can come back to bite you in the ass. Don't drag other people into your mess. I've always felt I didn't need a man to be happy, but when you're going through a breakup, you second guess yourself. Change is never easy. Being married and moving in with Damon had been a serious adjustment for me. I wasn't used to shacking up. I'm a very affectionate person, and when I love someone, I love hard, but I think it's also okay to miss someone. You can take time for yourself. I'm not the type of chick to be under someone 24/7. That would wreck my nerves, okay? Some of us hopefully learned that lesson after being in a few relationships. I know I did. You have to step back and see what it is you really want and need from companionship. And be honest with yourself while doing so. Raising kids can be hard too, depending on the difference in your values and your upbringing. I thought we were ready to be married. I don't think we really were. The night before the wedding, when I was pregnant, I was so unsure. I didn't know if I should go through with it. I remember asking my cousin Marty if I was making the right choice, and she said it was probably just my hormones making me wonder. But then I think everything happens for a reason. Life brought me Damon, and we stuck it out for as long as we could. Maybe I was supposed to go through all that to learn about myself and what I need. Being a wife was one thing, but being a mother taught me the true meaning of love. There's no love like it. No one is all good or all bad. Even if things didn't work out between me and Damon, I still could see his good qualities. No matter how it ended, I don't regret our marriage. He gave me Chase, my greatest accomplishment. And after all that, I became an even stronger woman. Here's something else I learned watching so many other women dealing with relationships. You should never stay with someone if it's not right or just for the kids. Don't let anyone treat you less than you deserve. You're worth more than that. Sometimes we settle because we're afraid to be alone or because we are afraid of change. But you shouldn't shack up for the sake of shacking up. I don't believe in playing house. Have you heard the term, why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? You should never move out of state for a man with no hardware on your finger. I wouldn't. It takes a lot of years to really know who you are as a person and to know what you need on a daily basis and know the same about someone else. It takes trial and error to find that out. If a relationship feels off or you're not getting your just due, move on. There's going to be someone else out there worthy of you. Sometimes people are afraid to be alone, but you can do bad by yourself. It can be good to heal and let go of old baggage. You can survive without a man. When I was fresh out of my marriage, I told myself that I could do this solo, even if it meant being a single mom. The most important thing is my happiness and the happiness of my child. Was it hard or scary at times? Heck yeah, but I always faced my fears. You can't change people, which is something I learned dealing with my dad. And you need to learn to accept people for who they are and how they are. It's up to God to fix whatever needs fixing. People can heal and forgive. I'm not mad at Damon, and he's not mad at me. He loves Chase and my son Chance, and that's all that matters. The divorce was hard for me, and it was harder because we were in the spotlight. I felt like I wasn't standing on solid ground most of the time. But there's a lot you learn when life drops a series of bombs on your head. I had to figure out what I was meant to do with the rest of my life. I knew TLC wasn't over, but for now, we were paused. I'd missed out on a lot of solo opportunities because I had given so much time to TLC. Sometimes I wonder what my career would have been if I put TLC on hold instead. I struggle to find artistic inspiration. Some artists, when they get depressed and heartbroken, feel the urge to create. I didn't. I missed Lisa. And it didn't feel right making music without her. So I had to decide, what was I going to do? I pushed myself to record a solo album. I did it because I thought people expected it of me, not because it felt natural. I had an offer on the table from LA, but he was fired, so that was the end of that. I needed something else, maybe something unrelated to music. If I hadn't been a singer, I was going to be a fashion designer. That was the only other career that ever really interested me. I've always loved style. I used to dress TLC for some of our early photo shoots and videos. I'd fly to New York, shop on LaFace's dime, and pick out our outfits. Style and fashion was something that felt familiar. When Chase was 2, I spent $78,000 in a single year on her clothes. She was so well dressed. I brought her Prada, Roberto Cavalli, Miss Bloomerine, D&G Jr., and Louis Vuitton. She was one of the first babies to ever wear Juicy Couture when it came out. Whatever was hot, she wore. Thanks to Jennifer Bandier, the ex-wife of our manager, Bill, for introducing me to all the expensive baby stores. Yeah. She and I got really close, and she took me to this high-end children's clothing shop called Z-Baby, where Tara Brivik Roundtree worked as a stylist and personal shopper. The first thing Tara said to me was, "Okay, I am so happy your baby came out pretty because I just don't think your husband's that hot." I bust out laughing. I dropped thousands of dollars at Z-Baby thanks to Tara and Jennifer. But the connection also inspired me. If there's one constant in this world, it's that people are always going to have babies, and they're always going to need to dress their baby. I could be part of that. In 2004, Tara and I opened a store called Chase's Closet in the River Oaks Shopping Center in Houston, which is basically the Rodeo Drive of Houston. The shop, which I had designed to look like Chase's actual closet, sold children's clothes for both boys and girls, ranging from infants to 12 years old. At first, I'd wanted to open the shop in Atlanta, but it was too costly. Tara had recently moved to Houston and suggested we try it there instead, and it ended up feeling like the right spot. The ideal was that we stocked only a couple items per size for every style because we wanted the kids to feel like little individuals. To me, style wasn't about looking like everyone else or following a trend. It was about finding your own way or expressing your personality through your clothes. I wanted kids to feel that way too. They could be unique and special instead of the same as everyone else. It was such a personal project for me. It felt like a dream come true. It was so amazing to see my store come to life, just as I had imagined it. People magazine listed us as one of the top 100 baby stores in America, and it was nominated for the #1 children's boutique in Texas for 4 years running. We also got a lot of celebrity connections. Angelina Jolie bought a shirt for her son Maddox, and we sold out of those shirts in a weekend just because he wore one. One of Julia Roberts' twins was photographed in another shirt and was on the cover of Us Weekly. Solange Knowles shopped there. We had this VIP service where the store would send a box of clothes to you, and you could send back anything you didn't want. It was a lot like the subscription boxes that are popular today. And it was meant to make the clients feel like they were getting a personal service without ever having to step into the store. We even took personal requests. We sent Paul Wall a blinged-out pacifier, which felt like the perfect fit for his child. In TLC, aesthetics had always been key. We'd been famous for our style. First, Lisa stuck that condom over her eye. Then we embraced baggy pants, giant, colorful shirts, and cross colors. Clothes are meant to be fun. They tell a story. Our look evolved over the years, but I think the consistent thing was that we made it our own. No one dressed like us, and they still don't to this day. They've tried to rip us off, but we were the original. Female singers today wear tiny little outfits even more so and take their clothes off a lot. But for us, the power was in the overall look, not how much of our midriffs were showing. We wanted to stand up for the chicks who didn't want to take their clothes off to prove they were sexy. I also launched my own line called Chase's Closet during the store's 4-year tenure. One of my dresses, the Chaser, was featured in Child magazine. Every dress sold really well. I felt like I had created something meaningful again, even if it wasn't music. It was a relief to know that I still had the drive and ability to create. It's something I'm continuing to pursue now, designing a line of children's clothes called Baby Bouge, and while I am inherently a performer, it's nice to express myself in other ways too. By 2005, I settled into my life more. I had my store, and I was finding inspiration there. The divorce was final. Every morning, I'd wake up and remember what a miracle Chase was and how lucky I was to beat the odds. Although TLC wasn't ready to make any new music or go back on the road, the band did resurface for a while. UPN came up with this idea to create a reality show around TLC, where Chili and I searched for a person to perform with us to see what the TLC experience was like. The show, Are You the Girl?, was never meant to replace Lisa, although some people got confused about that. The winner of the show would get to sing with us on a new single, but they weren't going to become a part of TLC. UPN started a casting call in February of 2005, going around the country looking for semi-finalists to be on the show. Later, they filmed me and Chili around New York, Miami, LA, and Atlanta, visiting the semi-finalists and delivering the news that they'd been offered an opportunity to audition for us. To be honest, a lot of the reason I did the show was because it was a nice payday. I got a big chunk of money, and the show was generally a success, but I didn't want to be there. I put on a happy face for the cameras. People kept asking, "Oh, so you're replacing Left Eye?" We weren't. We never said we were. Everyone heard us say we're not replacing Lisa over and over. They heard it from the horse's mouth, and they still didn't believe us. It was frustrating. I still didn't really know how TLC should be without Lisa. I felt like we were constantly trying to prove that we would be okay and that we could continue on. There was no talk of another album yet, though. Chili and I weren't ready. I still had other things on my agenda as Tionne rather than TBoz. I even got offers like being in People's Most Beautiful People issue twice. I knew my story was unique for a lot of reasons. Dallas Austin and I always reflected on our time at Jelly Bean. It was such a singular place. It had this unique vibe, and it meant so much to everyone who grew up in Atlanta during that time. We talked for years about making it into a movie. I joined forces with Jody Gerson to finally pitch it, basing it on Dallas's and my story of growing up in Atlanta and dancing at a skating rink. I knew Jody because she gave me my first publishing deal at EMI. She told me, "You have the talent to write." She helped me believe in myself and to find my inner writer. She had a lot of connections to movie producers and studio executives, so she was the perfect person to put this movie in motion. We approached producer James Lasseter, who was Will Smith's partner at Overbrook. I pitched him on the idea in his office with Dallas. I acted an entire scene out. "This how we used to dress," I explained, motioning. "This is what we used to do. I don't have a script, but this is how I see the movie." He smiled. He got exactly what I was envisioning and agreed to help us. Chris Robinson, who's directed music videos for people like Jay-Z and Alicia Keys, took it on as his first film. He was the right fit because he could capture both the music aspect and the story. Chris and Dallas spent a bunch of time together in Atlanta so he could get the right vibe of the city. There was talk of shooting scenes in New Orleans or Canada, but Dallas and I refused. It had to be in Atlanta. Dallas coordinated all of the music for the film. The idea was that ATL would tell an emotional, coming-of-age story that captured the feeling of Atlanta and Jelly Bean during that era. We ended up getting T.I. to play the lead, which was amazing because it was his first time acting in a movie. Big Boy, Killer Mike, and Monica all made appearances. Lauren London played me, or rather a version of me. Her character wanted to dance with the guys just like I had. The only difference was that me and Dallas never dated in real life. We shot ATL over the summer in 2005, and it was a great experience for me. I couldn't be on set as often as I wanted to because TLC had to promote Are You the Girl? Yet again, the band took me away from a personal project I was passionate about. It took me 11 years to get this movie made, and I couldn't even be there to see the entire thing through. ATL came out on March 31st, 2006, and came in third at the box office that weekend. Critics liked it for the most part, and the movie got nominated for a few awards, including an NAACP Image Award. It even won Best Hip Hop Movie at the BET Hip Hop Awards in 2006. There was controversy attached to it, too. Some theaters refused to screen it because it was too urban. They called it an urban black movie and said that it encouraged gang violence just because T.I. was in it. But it wasn't that sort of film. It had a positive ending, and it was about finding yourself. T.I. is supposedly working on a sequel, but I'm not involved. Telling my story in ATL was enough to satisfy me. The years passed and Chili and I didn't really discuss making another TLC album. We kept pursuing our own lives and our own families. We started to heal. I found out who I was outside of the band at the time and what I wanted in the future. Little did I know that the trials and tribulations weren't over. Life had another giant hurdle in store for me. Chapter 11. Mind over matter. After Lisa died and after my divorce, everything was a struggle. Gravity felt stronger than usual, pushing down on me. My body fought itself constantly. When I get emotional, my disease flares up more than usual, and this time was no different. As all these bad things happened, as I tried to deal with my grief and cope with the loss of my friend and my husband, I had good months and bad months. Sometimes it was like I wasn't even sick at all, but then I'd collapse and wind up back in the hospital. To make matters worse, I tore my meniscus and my cartilage started thinning. It was yet another ailment I had to work to maintain. Plus, everywhere your body is weak in the first place, the sickle cell pain goes. I got an ear infection that spread into my bloodstream that required surgery and a week in the hospital. Then I got the Norwalk virus and almost died. My mama found me passed out in my closet and forced me to go to the hospital. Where did I even get the Norwalk virus? That's something you find on ships, and I hadn't been on any ships. I was a mess, clearly. It felt like I had a long road to recovery ahead of me. Then in the fall of 2007, I started getting excruciating headaches. Yet another thing wrong with my body. I thought it was stress. I went to get massages and acupuncture, trying to help ease my pain, but the headaches became too severe. I became too dizzy to even stand. I knew something was wrong. I kept thinking, oh my God, what else? Finally, after weeks of pain, my mama said, go to the doctor, get it looked at. They gave me an MRI, but it takes several days to get those results back, so I waited. I was used to waiting for tests to come back. I was in a boutique owned by Bow Wow's mom, Teresa, shopping with my friend Gail when Dr. Bronstein, the doctor who usually helps me with my sickle cell, called. I pressed the talk button. Hello, I said, standing next to the rack of shirts. Tionne, where are you? He asked. I'm out shopping. I flipped through the shirts. Go home and call me back. Dr. Bronstein sounded serious, but I wasn't prone to panic, not after all these years. Whatever he had to say, he should say now. Bad news is bad news no matter where you are, although I was definitely getting tired of hearing it. Tell me what you have to tell me now, I said. I figured it was something serious or he wouldn't want me to go home first, but I wanted to hear it now. I blurted, do I have a brain tumor or something? He went quiet. There was a moment of stillness. I dropped the shirt sleeve. Panic crept in slowly. I had said it, not really knowing if I meant what I said. Finally, he replied, you do have a brain tumor. The news punched me in the face. I felt the tears start falling down my cheeks. I couldn't focus on anything else my doctor said to me. He kept talking, but it was gibberish, background noise. Was this real? What was happening? After everything, now this? He hung up. I think I said goodbye, but I don't remember. I was still in the store, next to some shirts I didn't want. I caught my breath, and I dialed my mama straight away. She was in Des Moines, with so much distance between us. I was desperate to talk to her, but she didn't answer. The phone just rang and rang, and I mumbled out a message. Mama called me back right now. Where was she? I walked out onto the sidewalk. I had no interest in shopping now. Gail took me across the street to eat at my favorite Mexican restaurant to cheer me up. I didn't have a choice but to carry on with my day. I might have a brain tumor, but I still had to eat lunch. I tried calling my mom again on the way over. No answer again. I wondered, how much tragedy is enough for one person? In a perfect world, we'd all get a certain amount of hardship and sorrow, and then we'd tap out, free and clear. But life isn't fair. Some people are given more to deal with than others. By the time my mama called back, I was finished with lunch and back in the car. I answered the call and came out with it. Mama, I have a brain tumor, I said. The words sounded so unbelievable as they fell out of my mouth. Not even real. I started crying again. Something about talking to your mother makes you feel like a child again. I just wanted her to make it all better. My mom, always calm, told me we would figure this out. That's what moms say when something bad happens. It's what I say to my daughter. But was it going to work out this time? I didn't really know. We hung up and I went home. My house felt empty and alien. I had this sense like I was falling and trying to grab hold of something on the way down, but there was nothing to grab. It was hard to focus on the truth and just to accept it outright. I thought about how I'd hauled around a lot of sadness and worry throughout the years. Had I been burdened with more than my share? Of course, those thoughts don't help. Life gives you what it gives you, even when it's something you don't understand, and you can only go on from there. I allowed myself one day to sob, and then I decided to fight, just like I've always fought through everything else. The next few days were the longest days of my life as I waited for appointments to find out what exactly was in my head. I started thinking in circles. Was I going to die? Was it cancerous? What would happen to my daughter? On the fourth day, I finally made it to see a series of specialists to get a real diagnosis. Dr. Bronstein had given me his opinion, but since his specialty isn't neurology, we all wanted to be sure we knew what was going on. After a series of appointments, the diagnosis arrived. I had a rare brain tumor called an acoustic neuroma. It was the size of a grape and nested deep in my right cerebellum behind my ear, pressing on my facial, hearing, and balance nerves. It was bad. It was a dangerous location for a tumor because it could affect so much. I could lose my hearing, I could lose my balance, my face could become distorted and affect my sight. I could become so dizzy the world would feel like it was constantly spinning, as if the world isn't already spinning enough. I wanted to ensure that I found the right person to deal with this. It needed to be the right surgeon, not just someone who saw me as a task or a dollar sign. I'm the type of person who goes on vibes and gut feeling. I won't just trust anyone. I needed a doctor who would try everything in his or her power to save me, and it seemed like no one wanted to do that. I saw a ton of doctors in Atlanta, but my gut kept telling me that none of them were the right person. Everyone told me that there were two options to handle the tumor. They could treat the tumor with radiation and leave it in my head, which wasn't a long-term option. It wasn't a real cure because it meant continuing to deal with the tumor for the rest of my life. It also involved burning away brain tissue, so you could come out with no memory and a tumor still in your head, possibly deaf, dizzy, and blind, with your face paralyzed now or in years to come. The other option was surgery to remove it. But the problem was that my body might not be able to handle the trauma because of the sickle cell. There was a possibility that my heart and lungs would collapse during the procedure and fail. Some of the doctors said that old school surgery wasn't a good idea for me because of my age and my disease. So neither option was great and neither sounded good for me. The decision seemed impossible. I struggled for days, asking my mama for advice and praying to God. After one of my doctor visits, my best friend Leslie went to get the car, and while my mama and I waited for him to pull around, I noticed she was staring off into space. "I wish it were me," she mumbled. I wasn't sure if she knew I heard her. I felt awful because, of course, I wouldn't trade places with her for the world. I've tried to put myself in her shoes. I couldn't imagine how I'd feel if it were Chase. But in that moment, it was hard to stomach my mother feeling that way. I could see the pain in her eyes. It gave me a reason to fight even harder. It was hard, but we always found something to laugh at. During one appointment, my mama, Leslie, and I were meeting a new doctor. The doctor said, "Remember these words, green circle key. I'm going to ask you for them again in 15 minutes. She examined me, pushing my head and looking in my eyes to see what type of tumor I had. 15 minutes passed. I couldn't remember the words. Apple, grass, I began. Shoot, I listed off every word I could think of. None were right. My mom and Leslie were rolling. The doctor was worried. The tumor might be affecting her worse than we thought, she told us. Please, my mama replied. This child's memory always been bad. The tumor didn't mess it up. I nodded. My memory had been tore up from the floor up since day one. It was a small moment during a lot of stressful moments, but it helped. It reminded us that we could still smile even in the face of tragedy. Now, to this day, Leslie calls me Green Circle Key. In the end, I decided I didn't want the tumor left behind. I wasn't going to leave some foreign thing in my head. It was better to take my chances on the surgery. I still had to find the right person to do this, though. I researched, and two names kept coming up. Dr. Rick Friedman, an ENT otolaryngologist, and Dr. Keith Black, a neurosurgeon. It was worth a shot. I got Dr. Friedman's cell phone number from someone and left him a message explaining the situation. He called me back from his son's baseball game. At the time, my boyfriend was the NFL linebacker Takil Spikes. His father had died from a cancerous brain tumor, so he knew about some of these doctors. You never know why certain people are brought into your life, but sometimes I wonder if Takil was brought into my life for that reason. The timing of it was uncanny. Takil sat on the call with me and Dr. Friedman, who was located in LA. I was living in Atlanta at the time, but I was willing to go wherever I needed to go to fix myself. I had seen all these doctors in person and looked into their eyes, but I didn't feel the same way I felt about any of them as I did talking to Dr. Friedman on the phone. He was the guy. I just knew he was the guy. I knew it with such ferocity that I packed my bags and moved back to Los Angeles before I'd even met him face to face. When I got to LA and finally met him in his office, my instincts were confirmed. The doctor took my hand and looked me right in the eye. I will do everything in my power to save your life so you can have your career and be there for your daughter, Dr. Friedman confirmed. The same way I would for my own family. Tears poured down my face. I knew it. I knew he was the guy. He was going to save me. Dr. Friedman would work with Dr. Black and Dr. Gabriel Hunt, who was a spine specialist, on the surgery. They would go in the back of my skull and snip out the tumor. Dr. Black asked me to give him an order, a preference for what I wanted to save. I picked my face first because I needed it for my career, and then my hearing because I'm a singer. I figured that if you looked at me, you wouldn't be able to tell if I was blind or deaf, so my face was the most important. I picked my balance last. They would do the best they could to save everything. At this point, I'd done all I could do and had to trust that this was going to work. My family is amazing, especially during hard times. They came together to help me get things in order to prepare for surgery. Dr. Bronstein told me, if you want to survive this, you need to get rid of all your stress. I had to block everything out. I had to ignore the press, who were still speculating on my divorce. I fired lawyers and assistants. I closed down my clothing store, Chase's Closet. I got rid of every person who could call me with any inkling of stress. I shut it all down. My family and close friends remained. They really stepped up, including my father, who came for the surgery. When he arrived, he had this look on his face like he was sorry for everything he'd done. I was glad for the support. It helped a lot. I want to say a special thanks to Leslie, Marla, Shanti, Tia, Talise, Wanda, Liz, my dad, Pastor Smith, Butch, and of course my mom. Thank you for praying for me and for being there by my side. My mom even had Chase's kindergarten class say a prayer for me because she said children's prayers are the purest. It really helped. The day, November 7th, 2007, arrived quickly. The night before the surgery, I lay in the hospital bed in Cedars-Sinai in Beverly Hills and ached to feel some peace. I was nervous. My lawyer had me sign power of attorney papers, and I'd taken out life insurance in case I didn't make it. The paperwork and my will made it feel all too real, and I knew my disease was going to make this surgery harder than it should be. I wanted to feel calm. I closed my eyes, and I asked God to release me from the fear. Whatever peace is, please give me that, I prayed. Just make me not afraid. I wanted to believe that I would be okay because it seemed like the only way I'd survive. The prayer worked. On the morning of the surgery, I felt at peace for the first time in my life. All my thoughts filtered out and my head went completely blank, and I felt nothing. I wasn't thinking about the possibility of dying or worrying about what might happen next. I was just quiet and still. The hospital staff thought I was nuts for having no emotions as they wheeled me into the surgery. But I was just calm. I was sure that God was listening. The surgery lasted 7 hours. It wasn't supposed to be that long, but the tumor was rooted deeper than they'd initially thought. But they got it out. The first thing I remember from waking up after surgery is Tequila smiling and my Aunt Wanda in the room. "Oh my God, you look so pretty," she exclaimed. "It looks like you have blush on your face. Your hair is still combed." I was foggy because of the drugs, but I was happy to hear that my hair was untouched. It had been a long-running joke with the doctors that they weren't supposed to mess up my coif during brain surgery. "Who gets a craniotomy and thinks about their hairstyle other than you?" Dr. Friedman had said. But I didn't want them messing up my hairline. As I woke up more fully, I heard Dr. Friedman whispering into my right ear. "Can you hear me, Tionne?" he asked. "Shh, I have to have surgery," I replied. I was so confused, but then I realized he was testing my hearing, and I could still hear. My ear still worked. They say if you come out of surgery looking okay, then most likely you'll end up with less or no paralysis. If you come out messed up, you'll stay messed up. So I thought everything was going to be fine because I looked fine and I could hear. Usually, you have to do an MRI after and then go to the ICU. But I got to go back to my hospital room. That was a good sign, too.
This is the end of the CD. The audiobook continues on the next CD.